Mark Zuckerberg, the leader of Facebook, you might be familiar with him, is the owner of a massive 700-acre, $100 million patch of land in Hawaii. It's beautiful oceanfront property. So he has that. He also has multiple lawsuits that he has filed against individuals, Hawaiian families, who have ancestral rights to very small patches of that land that he technically owns. And because of those lawsuits, people are not happy with Mark Zuckerberg. He has almost a dozen native families currently have the right to live on small sections of his land. And so he has started these lawsuits, quiet title lawsuits against them, to basically require that investigation is done into the ownership of these patches of land and make sure who has it and who can be paid off. But let's get a little bit of history to understand how he got to this position, how he can own the land, but other people own bits of it. Before Westerners came to Hawaii, stewardship of the land was a collective responsibility. Privatization came back in 1848, divvying up parcels between the king, the government, and the people. The Kuleana Act of 1850 was intended to allow Native Hawaiians to claim title to lands that they were personally cultivating, but ultimately less than 1% of Hawaii's land area was granted to indigenous people. That 1% is the product of this act that was supposed to give the land back to the people who are living on it and working it and cultivating crops. With Obama, we got 5% change. They got 1% change. The defendants in Zuckerberg's lawsuits are descendants of the original Kuleana title holders for small parcels surrounded by the estate. And here's where the problem comes from, because we're talking about bills from 160 years ago, or the effects of laws from 160 years ago. Some of the owners of the land are now dead, and the owners of the plots can be difficult to trace, since land possession under the old law was largely undocumented. And over time, as people would grow up, they'd have children, they would split their land parcels and give them to multiple people. Those were also largely undocumented transmissions, and then some of them would die and some would split, and you have a mess. Now, in a Facebook post on the 19th of this month, Mark Zuckerberg defended his lawsuits as a good faith effort to find all these partial owners so we can pay them for their fair share. But people living in Hawaii, a lot of them, although some of his neighbors defend him, some are not happy about this. One close by neighbor said he's kind of in a bubble. It would be much better if we could sit in a circle and talk. He talks about building bridges and not walls. Well, he built a 6-foot wall. I believe it's a mile long as well.
Wow.
And a professor...
Did he make the Hawaiians pay for it?
They might eventually. No, it looks like he'll actually pay them, which is nice. It's a nice change. But a professor of, I believe it's Hawaiian studies, says this is the face of neocolonialism. Even though a forced sale may not physically displace people, it's the last nail in the coffin of separating us from the land. And many people echoed what the first neighbor said, that if he would simply come and talk to people, make himself available. Instead, they make inquiries to see when he's actually going to be on that property, and they are rebuffed, no answer is given, and all they have is the lawsuits to go by.
Mixed feelings about this one. Okay, first of all, these are called, as you pointed out, quiet title actions. Doesn't seem so quiet now. So that's a little mislabeled. Okay, now I know why, of course, legally why they call it that. So look, the guy bought a big piece of property. If he had the right to buy the property, bless his heart. So I rail against multinational corporations and rich folks who rig the rules to their benefit. But if you just buy a piece of land, that's not rigging anything. You just bought it. Bless your heart. Okay? So he builds a 6-foot wall. If you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're one of the richest guys on earth, you're probably going to build a wall so people don't lollygag into your gigantic property, right? So I got no problem with the wall. Now, is he going to go meet with every landowner? Guys, he's the CEO of Facebook and the founder. He's probably fairly busy. So now, if he cares enough about this, should he do at least one meeting?
A town hall?
Yes, he should, right? And maybe he will, you know, and this is just probably the beginning of this brouhaha, if you will. Now, let's talk it through, right? Because if they don't live on that land and they have a parcel of land, and the first thing he's doing is not, like the title of the article on the Independent, which is a UK paper, makes it seem like Zuckerberg is ripping them from the land.
Yeah,
but they
that's
don't
a lot of
actually.
people's take.
Yeah, they don't actually live there, and he's not suing them to rob them at this point. He's actually going through a legal action to find out who owns the land so that he could pay them. That's not such a bad thing, right?
Like some of them may not feel like they should be obligated to sell.
So if we get to that point, which we haven't gotten to, then that's a really interesting question. And he might have accidentally opened up a can of worms where justifiably the landowner goes, as it turns out, my parcel of land is in the middle of your land, and so you're going to have to make a big, beautiful gate in that wall. And every day I'm going to come to the beach because that's my land. And that's that, if they don't want to sell.
Well, two little additional tidbits to consider. So the access to the beach is actually one of the important things that's at issue right now. A lot of people in the area do use the beach for fishing and various other sorts of traditional activities. They are worried that he might block off access to it. And this actually has shades of the same sort of thing happened in either Upper Santa Monica or Malibu, where there was this area where it's not a private beach, but some guy who owns land there just blocked it off and put a locked door, feeling like, well, what now? This is, I live right near here. You can't have it, you dirty peasants. And so whether Mark Zuckerberg is actually doing that, that's what people are worried about. And then historically, the fear is that this is just the latest in a long historical trend where people used to live on this island and they could afford to live on the island. But then because it's one of the most beautiful places in the universe, as far as we know, more and more rich Westerners started coming and buying up big blocks of land and driving up the prices to the point where people whose families have always lived there can't afford it anymore. It's like the ultimate island gentrification, basically. And they're worried that this is just another example of that, a huge, huge example of it.
Okay, so I should, as I continue to defend Mark Zuckerberg, I should note that we are partners with Facebook in that we use their platform, and this video will probably go up on Facebook, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just giving you that notice because I want to be upfront with you about it. Okay, now let me tell you about how great Facebook is. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. So, look, I get the overall trend, and it is fascinating that before 1848, that's not that long ago, nobody owned the land. Isn't that a trippy thought? They just lived there, and they didn't have to worry about this is mine and this is yours. And so now it's a little bit more complicated that throughout the world, right? When we start to do agriculture is when people get more literally territorial, right?
Although they don't have to.
Okay, that's right. They don't have to, but they did. But in Hawaii, all the way to 1848, you want to go live by the beach, live by the beach. You want to go live there, you go live there. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, I think a lot of people think, like the professor does, unfortunately, we don't live in that world anymore. And so now people do own the land. So I think that this is the beginning of this story, and I don't think anybody's done anything crazy or horrible yet. And I think that as much as those Native Hawaiians want Zuckerberg to give them the benefit of the doubt, it should be reciprocal. Like, he hasn't thrown, it's not like Donald Trump where he tried to kick a little old lady off her land so that he could build a parking lot for the limos that would come to his casino in Atlantic City. That's a literal story.
Wow.
Okay, and he tried to use government power to force her off of her land as she lived there her whole life. So, okay, now if Zuckerberg does that, we're having a different conversation. Are you sick of the mainstream media? Then I got good news for you. We're going to hire some investigative reporters and we're going to go house. We're actually going to investigate what's happening in this country and stand up for you guys. Help us do it. Go to tytnetwork.com/go. If everybody watching this video just gives a little bit of money, we'd have plenty to hire those investigative teams and unleash them on the country.